For the longest time, I avoided From Software games because of their famous or maybe infamous difficulty. It's not that I have a problem with difficulty. See, I love the difficulty of games like Crash Bandicoot and Cuphead. I just find that nowadays I don't have the time to learn and adapt to intense playstyles. Thankfully, a friend of mine named Eliza, who is a huge fan of From Software's Bloodborne, she encouraged me to push past my anxieties and play the game. I say thankfully because in my many years playing games, I have never come across something that matched the comprehensive and engaging lore of Bloodborne, and by extension, the Soulsborne franchise. What makes it so masterful in my opinion is that much of the lore in these games is left for the player to intuit for themselves, taking cues from other gaming masterpieces like Shadow of the Colossus, for example. The only thing that I think compares to the magnificent and extensive mythos of Bloodborne and the Soulsborne franchise are the numerous explanations and theories provided by the fans. Though this level of attention and discussion is exciting to Soulsborne fans, providing hours of fun speculation, it leaves people like me treading on dangerous territory. After having gone through the numerous threads and forums dedicated to Soulsborne lore, I've found it borderline impossible to provide an original take on any of these games, let alone one that would be accepted by such a zealous fanbase. To make matters worse, I have always said that I won't do videos on something unless I can provide an original take. That said, I think I might have discovered something about the story of Bloodborne that nobody seems to have noticed before. It is in relation to the story's theme of transcendence and how one achieves it through the use of pale blood. The way the hunter pursues pale blood and ultimately becomes a god reminds me of an old Hermetic tradition. I will present the parallels between that tradition and Bloodborne's story, but before I do, I just want to make two things clear. First of all, this video is not an explanation video for the story of Bloodborne. If you want something like that, allow me to refer you to videos by a YouTuber named VatiVidya. His videos are archetypal in the realm of Soulsborne lore, and should be watched by anybody who considers themselves a fan of these games. Secondly, what I am about to say is not definitive. It is not how you should view the story of Bloodborne. What I am about to present you are a number of parallels. Some of these parallels, I believe, are definitive, and others are speculation on my part. I will indicate where things change from definitive to speculative as we go along. Finally, I kindly ask that you please keep an open mind. Before I released this video, I put out the thumbnail art as a teaser. I told people that I potentially made a new discovery in the game and that it related to the phrase in the thumbnail art, how to become a god. People replied with skepticism, saying that the game already tells us how to become a god. You seek the quote-unquote pale blood. To find pale blood, you defeat the beasts and then Gehrman. Upon doing that, the harbinger of the pale blood descends in the form of the moon presence. Upon defeating the moon presence, the player character's body takes on an alien sluggish form, implying that you have achieved pale blood and in turn became a great one. The point I failed to get across is that there might be a certain subtext to this process that I don't think anybody has noticed. A hermetic magical language that is rooted in old religious tradition. I will tell you what that magical language is in a moment, but before I do, let us establish a common foundation for us to start from. In regards to Willem and Lawrence, it is fair to say that their attempts to transcend human consciousness failed. Though Willem's method of pure insight and no old blood had its benefits, he never managed to evolve beyond his human form, leaving him borderline motionless in his rocking chair. We also see the deficits that come along with accumulating insight, on the player character. The more insight the player has, the more susceptible they are to a type of damage called frenzy, or, in other words, madness. As for Lawrence and the Healing Church, his use of the old blood on himself and other people for research purposes resulted in the Beastly Scourge. In regards to the proper method to achieve transcendence, the game doesn't offer an articulated answer, but the actions of the player character throughout the story, nonetheless, offer a subtle solution. The answer is neither insight nor blood alone. It is both. This is one thing I believe is definitive. By contending with knowledge afforded by insight and the power afforded by blood, the hunter can become a god. By unifying these contrary ideals, which caused the initial Byrgenwerth schism, the hunt can be transcended. This union of contraries is the first part of this magical language I wish to discuss. It is a concept familiar to many religions. We see it in the Taoist yin-yang symbol with the union of chaos and order, a union that reflects Bloodborne's union of knowledge and power. We see it in the occultist Baphomet, with its dualities of human and animal, male and female, up and down, etc. We even see it in the character of the Jewish Yahweh, who is equally famous for his unending love as well as his jealous wrath. However, for the purposes of our discussion about Bloodborne, I wish to focus on the union of opposites in regards to alchemy. This is the magical language I referenced before. We see the union of opposites in alchemy in its most famous concept, that of the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone was the ultimate goal of alchemy. It was the perfection of matter in one stone. If one were to find the Philosopher's Stone, one could not only find the cure to all sicknesses, but the elixir vitae, a potion that would grant eternal life. The only way one could discover the Philosopher's Stone was if one's inner being could be brought into perfect balance, a balance that mirrored the perfection of the stone. That balance was found in the aforementioned union of contraries, or opposites. The old American alchemist George Starkey says the stone is the reconciliation of contraries, a making of friendship between enemies. This reconciliation, of course, reflects the reconciling of the different ideologies that Willem and Lawrence had within the hunter. In regards to this elixir vitae that can be extracted from the Philosopher's Stone, the alchemists gave it several names. For the alchemist known as Dorn, it was known as Veritas. To the alchemist known as Paracelsus, it was known as Theoria. The most widely accepted term for this arcane substance, at least by modern standards, is magnesia. In a book called The Hermetic and Alchemical Writings of Paracelsus the Great, the author, Arthur Waite, describes magnesia in his list of terms. It is the matter of the stone, which the philosophers sometimes call their red and sometimes their white magnesia. Before returning to Bloodborne, I would like to draw upon one last piece of information in regards to the Philosopher's Stone. The works of Western alchemy drew heavily on Christian scripture, associating the stone with Jesus Christ. This was the whole purpose of Western alchemy, to try and understand the natural world through Christian terms. Heinrich Kunrath, a celebrated hermeticist of the 16th century, identified the Philosopher's Stone with Jesus Christ, the son of the macrocosm. He thought that the discovery of the stone would unveil the true nature of the macrocosm, in the same way that Christ had brought spiritual plenitude to man, that is, to the microcosm. I make these references to Jesus, the Philosopher's Stone, the magnesia, and its red and white colors because they parallel much of what we see in Bloodborne. Let us establish another parallel which I believe is definitive. There was no shortage of attempts by the macrocosmic Great Ones to birth their own microcosms like the Christian God did with Jesus. For example, it is theorized that the formless Erden was the one who impregnated Queen Yarnum in order to birth Murgo, a process which mirrors the Virgin Mary's Immaculate Conception of Jesus Christ. We also see something similar with the birthing of the Orphan of Kos, or some say cosm, a word which, of course, reflects the Hermetic language of macrocosm and microcosm. By birthing great ones in a form understandable and perceptible by humans, the Bergenworth scholars would have succeeded in their goal and brought spiritual plenitude to mankind. Particularly, the school of Mensis would have been able to converse with the aforementioned Murgo instead of succumbing to the stillbirth of their brains. The problem is, as the description for the umbilical cords say in the game, every great one loses their child. This might be due to the sheer difficulty of compressing the knowledge of a great one inside a human brain, but who knows. Anyways, the scholars, along with the rest of humanity, had to find the eldritch truth, their Philosopher's Stone, by looking elsewhere. The scholars did make a positive step forward towards transcendence with the discovery of the old blood. The problem is, as I pointed out in regards to Lawrence and the Healing Church, they didn't know how to use it. The old blood led to positive effects at first, particularly in regards to the healing of all illness, a property that, as I said before, is associated with the Philosopher's Stone. However, it also exacerbated the primordial, beastly side of human nature, evidenced by all the monsters we see throughout Yharnam. As I said before, it was by balancing the use of insight and old blood that one could transcend, and the marker of this transcendence was pale blood. We see evidence for all of this with the quote-unquote kin Great Ones. These are the humans that evolved to higher states. These include Abritus, the supposed source of the old blood for the Healing Church, the Celestial Emissary and the other celestial kin, and Rom, the vacuous spider, who is theorized to be the child of Abritus. Granted, Rom's body bleeds red blood, but her head bleeds blood of a whiter hue. It seems that the closer one approaches the status of a true Great One, the shade of their blood changes. The kin Great Ones got close, but given the grayish color of their blood, it seems they never fully ascended. They never evolved their old blood to the higher status of pale blood. The fact that the lore describes a kin Great One like Abritus as being left behind suggests the inferiority of the kin Great Ones, an inferiority that the hunter seeks to transcend. Now, some might try to refute my theory by noting that the true Great Ones, like Amygdala and the Moon Presence, bleed red. This is true, but remember, these Great Ones weren't born as human beings or Dumerians. They didn't have to go through the process of evolving their blood like humans do. They don't have to rein in their dark bestial side and harmonize it with their light side, because they were already born as gods. But back to the original point. All of this suggests that there is a spectrum of color for blood, with red and pale, or white, making up the extremes. Though I speculate, this spectrum of blood reminds me of the aforementioned magnesia of the Philosopher's Stone, which is described as evolving from red to white. Here's a recipe for the Philosopher's Stone provided by the aforementioned Paracelsus. Quote, "In the first preparation, the chaos is blood red. Because the central sulfur is stirred up and discovered by the philosophical fire. In the second, it is exceedingly white and transparent like the heavens." And let us not forget that the magnesia was referred to by Dorn as veritas, which in Latin means truth. Just as the Dumerians and the Bergenworth scholars sought the eldritch truth of the Great Ones, the alchemists sought the veritas, the magnesia, of the Philosopher's Stone. Both their prizes were one that evolved from red to white. To top everything off, there is one last connection between Bloodborne and alchemy staring us right in the face. Before I address that though, I need to remind you about how one achieves the Philosopher's Stone. I said that one can only achieve the stone and the elixir within once one's inner self is brought into perfect balance. One will receive the outer reward in the form of the stone at the same time one achieves the inner reward. In the case of Bloodborne, we actually see the game's version of the Philosopher's Stone. And like I said, it is staring us right in the face. Just like the color of the blood changes hue, so does the moon. The moon was a god for many ancient religions, linked with the Greek Artemis and the Sumerian Nana. In Bloodborne, the moon is synonymous with the Great One, known as the Moon Presence, just as the Philosopher's Stone is synonymous with Jesus Christ. 2 stones, 2 gods. Right before the hunter can achieve transcendence, the moon descends along with the Moon Presence. The hunter's stone is within reach, if only they can overcome the final trial. Only then will they obtain the physical reward and integrate the eldritch truth in the form of pale blood, just as the alchemists hoped to find the Philosopher's Stone and integrate the Veritas. As I said at the beginning of this video, providing an original take on Bloodborne, or any of the Souls-type games, is nigh impossible. Even if my perceptions are wrong, I think you can understand why I couldn't go on ignoring these parallels. After all, given Miyazaki's fascination with medieval themes and magic, I think it's impossible that he never heard of a foundational mythological story like that of the Philosopher's Stone. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more analytical content. Finally, I wish to thank all the people on Twitter and Discord for reviewing my script. In particular, I'd like to thank Soul Porpoise, who is known for having one of the best videos on Bloodborne. He reviewed the script for this video before I put it out. Also, I would like to reiterate my thanks to Elisa for her encouragement and for providing the thumbnail art for this video. Links to her work are in the description box below. Until next time, just remember, stay yellow.